Imagine leaving your front door wide open tonight when you go to sleep.
Oh, wow. Just wide open.
Yeah, literally wide open, not just unlocked, but, completely open to the street. And you are totally confident that no one is going to walk in and take a single thing.
I mean, that sounds terrifying to most people.
Right. But imagine the confidence doesn't come from, like, a high-tech security system or an armed neighborhood watch or anything. It comes from living in a society where the very concept of theft has just been entirely eradicated from the human mind.
So the psychological impulse to just take something that isn't yours.
Exactly. It just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that requires a fundamental rewiring of how we perceive ownership
Right.
and vulnerability. You're basically describing an environment where you don't look at your neighbor as a potential threat or, a competitor for resources.
Which brings us to today's deep dive, because today we're looking at a text that claims this exact society already exists.
Right here on Earth.
Right here. Not in a science fiction novel, not in the afterlife. We are diving into this intriguing 2013 essay, or maybe manifesto is a better word. It's titled, How Far You Are from Heaven.
Yeah, written by Shuafeng, translated by Tungsten, and edited by Kair.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to really explore this incredibly specific framework the author lays out, because it proposes a literal physical utopian community, but it pairs it with this rigorous, almost like ruthless spiritual checklist you have to pass to get in.
And, just to set the stage for you, the listener, we're looking at this source material impartially. This is purely an exploration of ideas.
Right. We're not endorsing anything here.
Exactly. We're not endorsing the specific community it describes. But the text is fascinating because it acts as this profound psychological mirror. By describing a seemingly impossible paradise, it basically forces us to interrogate our deepest, most ingrained assumptions.
Yeah, assumptions about property, love, family, human nature itself.
So whether you consider yourself a philosopher, a minimalist, or maybe you're just someone who feels really overwhelmed by modern society, this is a radical thought experiment.
It really is. So let's unpack this. The text does not start small. It asks if you believe there is a place where everyone loves each other, where no one fights.
No quarrels at all.
None. And where the classic pillars of human civilization, marriage, family, currency, and personal property, have just been completely abolished.
It's wild to even try to wrap your head around that.
It is. And it describes a place where people never worry about food, clothes, shelter. They don't even worry about aging, sickness, or death.
Yeah, the environment described is, well, it's akin to Xanadu. The author paints this picture of a society where people just play games, they have endless fun, work is free, and there's free love.
But the part that really got me was the administration side of it.
Ah, right. The complete absence of it.
Yes. There's no management. Nobody is monitoring anyone else. No police, no bosses.
No courts.
I read this description of a society with no bosses and no personal property, and honestly, my immediate reaction is massive skepticism.
Sure. Because of human nature.
Exactly. Human nature is inherently tribal. If you drop, 300 everyday people into a beautiful valley with absolutely no rules and no managers, they're going to invent politics and hierarchies within a week.
Oh, absolutely. Some kind of petty conflict would spring up immediately.
Right. So how does a society without managers actually, harvest crops or build houses? The text says people never worry about food, but someone still has to plant the wheat, right?
Well, the text addresses this through the concept of free work.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanism here relies on this idea that when you remove the overarching anxiety of basic survival...
Like paying rent and buying groceries.
Exactly. When housing and food and care are totally guaranteed, labor is no longer a coerced transaction. It transforms from an obligation into a natural outpouring of an unburdened mind.
Mm.
The author insists that in this specific community, work and play basically blur together.
And the funny thing is, the author totally knows we aren't going to buy it. He literally anticipates the reader rolling their eyes.
Yeah, he does.
He writes, let me find the quote. "You do not believe this, do you? But it is 100% true." He claims this isn't some philosophical thought experiment. It has geographic coordinates right here on Earth.
He calls it the second home.
Right, which is now called the New Oasis for Life, associated with Lifechanyuan. It's presented as a literal physical location.
And honestly, anchoring this utopia in a physical reality is what makes the text so demanding. Because usually when philosophers talk about perfect worlds, they keep them safely tucked away in the distant future.
Or like in a divine afterlife.
Right. And because it's safely out of reach, it requires nothing of us today. But by insisting this place is operational right now, the text sort of strips away that comfort.
It forces you to confront it.
Yeah, and that imagery, the unbolted door you brought up earlier,
Uh.
that's explicitly in the source. The author writes that no one would pocket anything sound on the ground, and doors are not bolted at night.
It paints this picture of ultimate trust. It sounds like the ultimate post-scarcity society. Sort of like something you'd see in Star Trek, where humans have moved past currency and just work to better themselves.
It's a great comparison, actually.
But I do have to push back on the framing here. Because does the author genuinely believe that this earthly community, the second home, is a finished, flawless paradise?
You're wondering if it's considered perfect already.
Yeah, because claiming you've built absolute perfection on Earth with human beings feels like a setup for inevitable failure.
Well, the author actually introduces a crucial caveat for that exact issue. He doesn't claim this earthly community is the final, ultimate heaven.
Okay, so what is it?
He writes that the residents, whom he refers to as Chanyuan celestials, are living in a reality that is, quote, only one step away from heaven.
Only one step away, so they aren't at the peak of the mountain yet.
Right. Think of it like base camp on Mount Everest. You aren't standing on the absolute summit, but the air you're breathing is fundamentally different from the people way down at sea level.
That makes sense.
The author says these residents have seen the misty scenery of the true paradise. So the second home on Earth serves as a threshold. It's a staging area where people prepare themselves for the ultimate spiritual destination.
Okay, that structural logic makes a lot more sense to me, but it naturally brings up the next big question. If this place is essentially a staging area with no locks and no money, you can't just let anyone walk through the door.
Oh, absolutely not. The system would collapse instantly.
Right. If someone brought their modern, hyper-competitive baggage inside, it would break. So what kind of person actually qualifies for this earthly Xanadu?
Well, this is where the source material transitions. It moves from describing the external utopia to demanding this really intense internal audit of the reader. It gives a highly specific checklist of prerequisites.
And the metric it uses to measure your qualification is so unique. It's not about your skills or your charitable deeds.
No, not at all.
It measures your ideology to determine your, physical distance from heaven. And sometimes this distance is metaphorical, but sometimes he uses bizarrely specific mileage.
Yes, the distances are very precise.
So he challenges the reader, saying, if you believe what I am saying here, then come to see how near you have come to heaven now. And then he just starts systematically dismantling everything we believe about who we are.
The very first requirement is definitely a shock to the system.
It really is. Let's look at it. He writes, if you do not believe that you were made by the greatest creator, but rather by your parents, then you are endlessly far from heaven.
Endlessly far.
Endlessly far! Just for acknowledging basic biological lineage.
Well, the underlying logic there is about achieving a complete unmooring from tribalism. Think about it. If you believe your ultimate origin is your parents, you are tethering your identity to a specific bloodline.
A specific clan or nation.
Exactly. And that inevitably creates an us versus them dynamic. You're going to naturally favor your blood relatives over strangers. But if everyone operates under the belief that they were made by a singular greatest creator, that biological hierarchy is just flattened.
Wow, okay, so everyone becomes equally kin. You have to destroy exclusivity right at the root.
Right. You can't just be nice to your neighbors. You actually have to stop viewing your own family as more important than your neighbors.
That's heavy.
It is. And the text continues to use these distance metaphors to illustrate conceptual hurdles. Like the author states, if you never save wealth in heaven, then you are 108,000 kilometers away from heaven.
Okay, that specific number, 108,000 kilometers, is so striking to me. It feels incredibly precise for a spiritual manifesto. What is the significance of that exact measurement?
Yeah. So that is a deeply resonant cultural phrase in Chinese literature, 108,000 kilometers, or Xiwan Baqian Li.
Okay.
It famously features in the classic 16th century novel Journey to the West. It represents the exact distance the mythical Monkey King, Sun Wukong, can travel in a single magical somersault.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, and more importantly, it's the stated distance between the mortal realm of the East and the Western paradise of the Buddha. So the author isn't just picking a random large number here.
He is invoking a specific proverb.
Exactly. A proverb that denotes a tremendous, heroic, almost insurmountable journey. It basically implies that if your wealth is purely material, reaching paradise isn't just hard. It requires a mythical level of effort to bridge that gap.
That context changes everything. It's fascinating. And the karmic accounting is interesting too. Like, it mentions that unpaid debts from all previous lives keep you very far from heaven.
Yes, it covers past lives as well.
But where the text really gets aggressive is how it attacks modern definitions of success. It explicitly says that if you think the biggest pride in life is money, power, and fame, you are very far from heaven.
Which, to be fair, we've heard from almost every major philosophy.
True. But then it goes after the things everyday people consider to be truly virtuous.
Right. This is the ideological core of the essay, where it totally diverges from standard modern morality. It states, quote, "If you think marriage, family, and relatives are the biggest wealth in your life, then you are quite far from heaven."
See, that is the line that made me put the text down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It really is. It's like applying the ultimate Marie Kondo minimalist lifestyle, but instead of cleaning out your closet, you are throwing out your fundamental human connections.
That's a really good analogy.
Because we can easily grasp giving up a physical wallet or a sports car, you know? We see the logic in material minimalism. But giving up the concept of your own family as your primary source of wealth,
It's radical.
it's massively radical. Looking at your marriage and asking, does this spark joy or does it tether me to the earth? That's just a jarring paradigm shift.
It's jarring because it attacks the primary support structure of human society.
No.
But, if we follow the internal logic of this specific utopia, it actually makes complete sense.
How so?
The text demands absolute detachment from exclusive earthly bonds because exclusivity is the engine of inequality. Think about it. If your family is your greatest wealth, you will prioritize them above everyone else.
Right, you'll hoard resources so your kids have an inheritance.
Exactly. You will favor your spouse in a dispute. That very natural human instinct to protect your inner circle is the exact mechanism that leads to locked doors, private property, and eventually societal friction.
Okay, I see it now. To achieve universal harmony where doors are left wide open, your love cannot be walled off behind a family name.
Precisely. Your love has to be universal.
So breaking ties with your bank account and your nuclear family is really just the external layer of the transformation. You're just like clearing the furniture out of the house before the structural renovation begins.
That's exactly it, because the text then turns entirely inward.
Right. It argues that the deepest barriers to paradise aren't what you own or who you're related to, but what you are actively cultivating inside your own mind.
Which brings us to this vivid and honestly incredibly demanding metaphor used in the source. The soul garden.
The soul garden.
Yeah. The author suggests that our inner lives are like gardens. And to get close to heaven, you can't just plant good things. You actually have to meticulously pull up a highly specific list of what he calls poisonous weeds.
And it is an exhausting list to look at. It's this thorough, devastating emotional inventory. I have it right here. He writes, if there are still poisonous weeds like jealousy, complaining, anger, possession, control, hypocrisy, selfishness, greed, pride, laziness, comparison, precaution, meanness, cruelty, extravagance, waste, or resentment growing in your soul garden, then you are very far from heaven.
It's a lot. And when you really analyze that list, you realize it encompasses almost the entirety of the typical human ego.
Pretty much, yeah.
It targets the very survival mechanisms that got humans out of the cave. Take comparison, for example. The entirety of modern economic and social life is driven by comparison.
Absolutely. I mean, social media is basically a multi-billion-dollar engine powered exclusively by the weed of comparison. We are literally conditioned to measure our success by looking at the person next to us.
Right. And consider precaution. The text identifies the need to guard oneself against potential harm as a poisonous weed.
Which is wild, because in modern society, precaution is just viewed as common sense.
Exactly. You look both ways before crossing the street. You buy insurance. But in the psychological landscape of this utopia, precaution implies a fundamental distrust of your environment and your fellow humans.
Oh, I see. It goes back to the unbolted doors.
Yes. If you harbor precaution in your soul garden, you will naturally want to bolt the door. And that breaks the harmony of the whole community.
Man, it really is a total systemic overhaul of how we think. And it's not just about what you feel internally either. It extends to strict interpersonal rules.
Right. How you treat others.
The text says you are far from heaven if you never know what confession and apology are. You have to possess gratitude. You cannot covet personal property. You can't attempt to control or hamper anyone else's freedom.
And reiterating that controversial family point from earlier, it explicitly says, if your love is only focused on a small group of people, then you are very far from heaven.
Universal love is treated as a mandatory baseline for entry, not some like lofty, optional ideal. But within this extensive list of behavioral rules, there is one specific point that creates massive friction with contemporary cultural norms.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I have a massive issue with this particular rule, and I think most modern listeners would too. The author writes, if you often tell your sad stories or complain a lot to others, then you are very far from heaven.
It's a provocative one.
I really want to push back on this. We live in an era where modern therapy and mental health advocacy emphasize the exact opposite. We are actively taught that venting and speaking your truth and processing your sad stories with the supportive community is the primary path to healing.
It's how we connect.
Exactly. If you go on social media today, there's a massive culture of, trauma dumping, sharing your deepest pain to find solidarity. But this text treats sharing sad stories as an emotional pollutant. It's essentially demanding a complete emotional detox.
The concept of an emotional detox is a perfect way to frame it, actually, because the text operates on a completely different psychological paradigm than modern therapy.
How so?
It views recounting sad stories not as a necessary processing tool, but as an anchor that drags the entire community backward.
Yeah.
If we analyze this within the framework of the second home, dwelling on the past, even a painful past that totally wasn't your fault, it pollutes the communal water supply.
Wow. Okay.
If you are constantly recounting your sad stories, you're basically demanding that others carry the weight of your past. That creates friction, and it destroys that serene, anxiety-free atmosphere the community absolutely relies on.
It's like you're tracking thick mud from the outside world onto the clean floors of the second home and expecting everyone else to help you mop it up.
That's exactly it. The text requires a person to be entirely present and forward-facing. And this connects directly to the very next requirement the author lists.
Which is?
If you have not returned to a childlike state, then you are very far from heaven. Because children generally don't sit around recounting the traumas of their past years. They exist almost entirely in the present moment. They're ready to play, explore, and experience the world without the burden of history.
So the text demands that residents strip away the cynical, burdened, complicated layers of adulthood and return to a state of innocent, unburdened presence.
Exactly.
So let's just say someone actually pulls this off. If you can somehow manage to let go of your exclusive family ties, stop telling your sad stories, pull up the weeds of anger and precaution from your soul garden, and return to a purely childlike state of presence, what actually happens?
Well, the author concludes the essay with both a promise and a challenge. He states, if the above situations do not exist, then you are just one step away from heaven.
One step away.
Yes. He explains that the reason everyday people cannot see the scenery of heaven is simply because they are too far from it ideologically. Those internal weeds are literally blocking the view.
He writes, if you try to get close to heaven step by step, the scenery will become clearer. Eventually, you will see heaven.
And then he throws down the final gauntlet to the skeptical reader.
Oh yeah, I love this part.
He says, just have a try if you do not believe me. It's an invitation to test the hypothesis not through debate, but through personal, rigorous action.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why spend time dissecting a 2013 manifesto about a utopian community?
Right. Why does it matter?
Because even if you have absolutely no plans to seek out an intentional commune or give away your life savings or abandon your worldly possessions, this text serves as an incredibly powerful personal audit.
It really does.
It asks you to stop and evaluate your internal real estate. It forces you to look at your daily life and ask, how much space in my own soul garden is currently being choked out by the weeds of anger or comparison or that desperate desire for control?
The enduring value of this source is its profound synthesis of the macro and the micro. It elegantly links macro-societal harmony, the grand, sweeping vision of doors unlocked at night, and a world without war with micropersonal accountability.
Right.
It essentially argues that you fundamentally cannot build a frictionless, peaceful society until you have eradicated the friction within your own mind. The physical utopia is ultimately just a reflection of the internal landscape of the people who live there.
It really flips the script on how we usually think about progress. Because most of our ideas about building a better world focus on changing the external rules, right?
Yeah.
Fixing the economy or electing a different government.
Definitely.
But this text argues that the only way to build a truly new world is to build an entirely new type of human being to inhabit it.
And achieving that requires a level of personal transformation that is, frankly, daunting, to say the least. But as a thought experiment, it challenges us to consider what specific attachments and grievances we're clinging to that might actually be holding us back from finding our own personal peace.
Before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to explore on your own. Something that builds on this source material but takes it a step further. Let's say we actually did it. If humans miraculously succeeded in building this completely frictionless society, where there is no property, no struggle, no sad stories, and all of our needs are perfectly met without any effort.
The ultimate utopia.
Right. Would the human mind actually be able to handle it? I mean, we spent millions of years evolving specifically to solve problems, recognize threats, and overcome adversity.
That's our basic wiring.
Exactly. So if you put that highly evolved problem-solving brain into a state of eternal, unbothered bliss, would it eventually invent new conflicts and new anxieties just to have something to do? Can a creature built by struggle actually survive in paradise?
That is a fascinating question.
Hmm.
It really makes you wonder whether the friction we spend our entire lives trying to escape is actually the very thing giving our lives meaning and shape.
Right. So the next time you find yourself daydreaming about a perfect world, safely up in the clouds, look at the coordinates of your own life right now. Look at the doors you lock and the weeds in your own garden, and ask yourself just how far you really are from the reality you want to build.
A great point to reflect on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.